Luka Doncic monster triple-double to outduel Steph Curry in a classic ending. Talk about that, plus all of the travels. What does this mean for the NBA with so many travels being called? And then our real or fake, is the Karl-Anthony Towns injury actually going to help the Minnesota Timberwolves? It's all right now on the Locked On NBA podcast.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I really wish everybody could see the intro dancing, little 20-second dance party that we have. You can't, maybe we should record it somehow. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's the Wednesday Locked On NBA podcast. On Wednesday, we're your hosts. I'm John Karalis, host of the Locked On Celtics podcast. And you can find me on Twitter at John_Karalis.
And I am terrible dancer, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and the host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast. I got the hair going. I had to kind of like comb it back just to...
The vibe worked. The vibe worked. This show is free. It's available everywhere you get your podcast. The show is on YouTube. We would love it if you watch the show on YouTube. And thank you for making it your first listen every day. Today's show is brought to you by Sweatblock. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, perhaps by dancing uncontrollably, you can try Sweatblock. Save 20% off with a promo code Locked On. Promo code's Locked On at sweatblock.com. Also available on Amazon. Jake, you ready to do a podcast?
Oh, always. It's late on Tuesday. We had a light action of NBA game. So that Warriors, the Warriors Mavs game was fun, especially that fourth quarter with the shot making.
Yeah, the fourth quarter there was, incredible. Steph Curry is unbelievable. We'll talk about that in just a second. Second segment, we're going to talk about the travels because there were, I think, 300 of them called in this game. And then later on, our real or fake. We do real or fake every Wednesday. Karl-Anthony Towns is injured. It's actually, the news is not so bad. So now the question is this actually going to help the Minnesota Timberwolves? But let's get into this game, this wonderful basketball game, a 116-113 win by the Dallas Mavericks. These are two teams that are kind of similar in that they are underwhelming in a sense. They are winning games at home. They're not winning them on the road, and they are very dependent on their stars to carry them through. And this one was a following that same path where Luka gives them a big lead, like a monster first quarter lead. He sits, the Warriors storm all the way back. They take a lead. It happens again in the second half. They take a late lead, but then it's Luka just going off, and he finishes with a 41 point, 12 assists, 12 rebound, 4 steal, by the way, triple-double. An incredible effort. And so he actually made some key defensive plays down the stretch to help encourage the Warriors, who were already making a bunch of turnovers on their way to losing this game.
Look, he was great. The shot making down the stretch from both teams was pretty absurd. You had Tim Hardaway Jr. making big threes, had a good mean mug in front of the camera too after one of them, which was really fun to see. Yeah, that was just perfect. And then Luka just being Luka, and this Mavs team needs him to do that. There's a lot of pressure on his shoulders for them right now. If he scores under 30, it feels like they have no chance of winning the game. And they're 0-5 when he scores under 30 so far this year. So it feels like he's going to need to be putting up these triple doubles regularly. And the good news is he's capable of doing that. And you mentioned defensively, he was kind of key, right? He was getting his arms in the passing lanes. He was getting his hand on the ball and contesting things. He did a really good job to more or less just like drag whatever this Mavs team is over the line to get the win over an at times underwhelming Warriors team. But when their starters are in, that starting lineup for them is really, really good. You also have Lamb, who's played exceptionally well for them and was big in this game. It was just like a fun game to watch all around. These are the type of things you got to love on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, and look, this is a Mavericks team that's searching for something. And the guys yesterday, Matt and Dave, talked a bit about getting Kemba Walker. Kemba Walker was there. He was on the bench and is not going to play right away. And they're hoping, and I'm not going to repeat some of the stuff that they said in yesterday's show. They're hoping that he can find something in whatever limited time he's going to play to kind of help them out.
They need more creators, more shot creators, right? Like that was the thing. That's why it looked like they might lose this game after Spencer Dinwiddie was tossed for the flagrant 2, which was a flagrant 1 and not actually a flagrant 2. And they had a couple of possessions, the Mavs did, where it was like an adventure just trying to get the ball inbounded and over the half court line. They really struggled with that because Luka at that point was the only guy kind of capable of doing that. So even if Kemba can't score or even if he can't shoot, just to have another reliable ball handler on the court, I think it's going to be important for him, and you saw they desperately need one.
They very, very desperately need one. By the way, yeah, that flagrant 2, I really do think that there needs to be some adjustment to the replay process, because when you slow it down, of course, when you slow it down, it looks like he's like winding up and bringing it wide over. But when you play it in real time, he's just really just trying to clear a little bit of space. Like, I don't think when you talk about flagrant 2, you're actually trying to elbow that dude in the face. And that's not what he was trying to do. And that's why he was laughing on his way off the floor. And he, dapped up Jordan Poole on the way out. He didn't mean to do that. I think they just need to, when you slow everything down to this, that slow a level, you're not seeing the real play. You're seeing something else. And so that's just my little aside there. Not to get too in the weeds on Kemba. I think he can help. I'll put it this way. I don't know how much he can hurt, because when Luka's off the floor, they need somebody. And when Luka's off the floor, the Mavericks are awful. And they need something. So I feel like Kemba can at least help coming off the bench and being, to back him up for like 15 minutes a game. But
yeah, you see them missing Jalen Brunson. Like that's kind of what this 100%. Is.
And look, they're not, the Christian Wood experience is not working right now. Not the way they wanted it to. That is such a, you got to listen to the Locked On Mavs podcast, because this Christian Wood thing has been such a kind of up and down. I've seen Christian Wood at his best. He played really well against the Celtics, but then you see him play horribly defensively. He's just a mess out there. He was a -16, 4 points, 2 of 12. You got to get Magic Luka to, like you said, drag them over the finish line. And, you're going up against the Warriors team that got Curry, who shot, okay, could have shot a little bit better. But 32 points, carried that load. And
he also had that ridiculous 3 late in the fourth where I don't even know how he saw the rim or got that shot off. That has to be one of the most if you haven't seen this yet and you're just tuning in to kind of catch up on the night that was, like, go find that shot by Steph Curry, that 3 coming off of, relocates after being in the paint, gets back out to the 3-point line in the corner, curls up a little bit, gets the ball and rips it. Like, did he look at the rim on that?
He barely. That's just the testament to how awesome the greats, the best of the best are, because you just have to get squared up. You just have to get squared up just for a fraction of a second. It's like a golf swing. We always compare jump shots to golf swings, and it doesn't even matter in a golf swing all the funkiness that goes behind it, as long as when you hit that ball, it's square. And that's Steph Curry. You can be all over the place. You can be spinning. You can jumping. You can be running. As long as when you release that ball, you're square for that little bit of a second. And that's what he does, man. The body control from Steph is amazing.
When I hit a golf ball square, it still goes to the left or the right.
I am still not sure what hitting a golf ball square really is. Warriors, look, struggling here. The Warriors on the road and the Warriors at home are like 2 different teams. We have said, and we'll wrap it up quickly here, we have said we're not worried about the Warriors. And I'm still not worried necessarily about the Warriors, although now we're 25% of the way through. We're a quarter of the way through the season, and they're still trying to work through some of their kind of lineups and everything. And here they are sitting at 500. Has your mind changed at all about where the Warriors are?
No, not at all, actually. I'm very comfortable with them, and I think they're still going to be fine. That starting lineup for them is really freaking good and is head and shoulders better than, in terms of net rating and some of the advanced statistics that we look at, better than any other starting lineup out there. It's their depth that kills them. When you get into the postseason and you're playing those starters heavier minutes, when you're tightening and shortening your rotation, that's when they're going to really be at their best. Because if those 5 guys are playing at that level, I don't know if there's another 5 that can truly compete with them. Probably. And it's going to be the depth and the bench that's really going to shine you. But if their bench can just be not completely abysmal and even be just slightly subpar, which might be able to get there by the end of the season, that's still a really good team. That's a team that's going to be able to still beat anybody, no matter whatever their playoff seed is.
I tend to agree with that. They are just trying to figure some things out with their lineups, and they've earned the trust. They've earned their trust. And they've also earned the end of this segment. Wrapping it up there, we're moving on to actually more on this game, because one of the key moments in this game is a Steph Curry travel. You never call it travel in a situation at the end of the game. Curry turnover, travel, one of like a dozen in that game. We're going to talk about this point of emphasis for the NBA that's got fans sweating right now, and Sweatblock is one of the our fine sponsors in today's podcast. Look, I'm sitting here in the Boston area. It's cold outside. You walk inside, and it's very easy for me to start sweating and to have that not shut off. And look, I'm in a media room. I'm talking to athletes. I'm talking to coaches. I'm talking to executives. I don't want to be sitting there sweating and having them like look at me and go, what the hell is wrong with you, man? So use Sweatblock. Sweatblock is a wipe that you take a shower in the morning, you wipe it on in your problem area, and sweat goes away for up to 7 days. Up to 7 days. If you don't believe me, they have a dry shirt guarantee. If Sweatblock doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back. So it's really a no-risk proposition. And there are customer reviews, 10,000 5-star reviews on Amazon. If you want to check it out on Amazon, it's been one of the best sellers, a bestseller on Amazon for the past 10 years. So you got to try Sweatblock if you know somebody who has this issue. And you can get 20% off right now with the promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com. Sweatblock.com, promo code LOCKEDON, 20% off with the promo code LOCKEDON. And again, if it doesn't work, you get your money back. It is also available on Amazon. A couple other games in the association that we're not really going to cover here because the New York Knicks just throttled the Detroit Pistons by 30, and the Portland Trail Blazers are on their way to a similar result over the LA Clippers. So if you want more on that, go to Game to Game on here, right here on the Locked On NBA feed. Game to Game has you covered in depth from both sides, both Locked On experts for each team. It's a great way to get caught up on the night. So I can tell you one thing that is going to be covered on in this Mavericks Warriors game, Jake. It's the amount of travel calls that we heard and we saw. And look, we're seeing it across the league in all the games. Obviously, it's a point of emphasis from the officials. In fact, NBA Communications on Tuesday sent out a video talking about their points of emphasis, and the travel was on there. They are really cracking down on the changing of pivot feet, all the little things that maybe you would say, hey, this is just something in the NBA you get away with. Now they're letting it go through. And I'm sorry, they're not letting it go through anymore. They're calling all of these travels. What do you think, Jake, is going to be the net effect here on all of these travel calls?
Yeah, it was interesting to see all of those calls in such a big game and then in such a big spot, right? With Steph Curry getting that travel called on him on what would have been the go-ahead shot at the time. He doesn't even get that shot off because he rightfully changed his pivot foot from his left to his right. They called a travel. It was the correct call. Let's not get that incorrect there.
No, that was actually a travel, yes.
Yeah, just in that moment, it was almost shocking, I think, to see, because you never see it really called there. So I think this is like the result, first and foremost, right, of just so much manipulation of the rules. And I think they're starting to see defenses decline a little bit because of it, and people kind of upset. It's similar to like a catch in the NFL where you don't know what a catch is. Well, what's a travel now? And no one wants that to kind of be the discussion around the game. So this is a way of kind of trying to cut all of that off, cut down on some of the manipulation of the rules, and force guys to run actions and do other things rather than, do stuff like James Harden was known for. And I think that's the right effect. It's to what? So like the net effect, like what's the end result of this is you're just going to have to be a little bit more creative on offense and run more ball screens and be more creative to spring guys and get them open, because you're not going to be able to take advantage of some of these rules, I think.
I've said a number of times that I don't feel like this has to be the way it goes in the NBA. You don't have to sit there and say, oh, well, travel is just part of the NBA. No, you don't have to have a league where, and the other point of emphasis is the palming. When you have the ball and you bring it too far over you can have it on the side, but when you get past 3:00, you really risk having that palming, the dribbling violation, which again, I am all for, because it's just going to make things a little bit more even. The guys yesterday were talking about, why can't anybody get a stop? I think this is kind of a way for the league to put the brakes a tiny, tiny bit on the offense without changing a rule, without taking away the things that are exciting. They took away the take foul, and offenses have exploded. And I think the take foul is a big part of why offenses have exploded. Calling the travels, forcing guys to, like, at this point, offense is already out of control. So now that offense is so wide open, now you got to force guys to like stick to the nitty gritty rules of the game. Like, you don't need an extra advantage by pausing your dribble for like a second and then taking 4 steps and getting by a defender. Defenders already have it hard enough. So I really think this is the NBA sort of pulling back and saying, okay, we've given you a ton of freedom. Now we're not going to let you abuse that freedom.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to do it, and that's something I was going to say here, right? This goes back partially to the illegal defense rule change back in 2001, which just kind of led offenses to explode a little bit. It's really led to the rise in three-point shooting too, and now these offense and these players have so much more space to do whatever it is you need to do to try and get to the rim or to create an open three-pointer. You really need to be traveling to do that in this day and age. Absolutely not, right? It's never been easier to score. It's never been easier to shoot threes, create space for threes. This just levels the playing field a little bit, probably not too much. And as you said, kind of, if you're looking at it as a scale, a balance, it shifts it ever so slightly towards the defense. You guys already got it hard enough. Don't need to worry about this guy cheating. Not cheating is probably the wrong word here, but manipulating the rules, let's call it.
Yeah.
That's cheating, whatever. And it's like, that's a semantics issue. And it brings it more in line to be a little bit more balanced. And I think that's kind of where it's going. So these guys that have kind of gotten by with some of this, and the NBA has been cracking down on these unnatural shooting motions or unnatural movements for a year or two now. We did the show last year. I remember that, of like, who's it going to impact the most? Is it going to be a guy like Steph Curry, was who you picked, as opposed to a guy like James Harden? Look what it did here in this game last night with Curry getting that travel violation. They're up to close to 4 travel calls per game now, which almost feels unheard of. Like, that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's actually a lot. And so when you start to look at those numbers, the turnovers it causes because of that, guys need to kind of adjust a little bit. When they do, they'll be fine. The court is still spaced out plenty. You're not really that hard pressed to need to travel. It'll end up being okay, but there's going to be an adjustment period at first.
Yeah, I'm actually, the more I think about it, the more I kind of like the emphasis on it. This is kind of the time to start doing it. December, January, let the guys get used to it so they can have the stretch run and understand. There are a lot of these travels that it's not even just shifting your pivot foot. It's you get the ball, you've established a pivot foot, and now you've lifted your foot up to create this load. You're taking this load step where you're pushing off, and that allows that little extra burst to get by a defender. Well, if you don't have that, then the defender actually now has a chance to slide in front of you. He's still not allowed to touch you. He's still not allowed to put his hands on you. But you give the defender like a little half second of, okay, I can slide and maybe I can cut this guy off. Maybe I can turn him around. And like you said, the floor is still perfectly spaced. There's still plenty of opportunity. There's no reason for any offensive player to actually complain about this. All you got to do is just understand, hey, remember the pivot foot? Remember in college when you had to use your pivot foot and that if you lifted it, you got called for travel? Well, welcome back to that. Get used to it. So, all right, let's go on to our real or fake. And the question is about Karl-Anthony Towns, who is dealing with a calf strain. And thank God, by the way, only a calf strain, because that looked bad. But our real or fake question coming up in a moment. Is this actually going to be a good thing for the Minnesota Timberwolves? We'll talk about that. First, today's show is also brought to you by ExpressVPN, which we know protects your privacy and security online, right? But here's something you might not know. You can also use ExpressVPN to unlock movies and shows that are only available in other countries. Maybe you've run out of stuff to watch on Netflix. This will change your world. ExpressVPN allows you to binge The Office on UK Netflix. It's simple to do. Sign into your Netflix account, fire up ExpressVPN on the app, change the location to UK, refresh, and that's it. ExpressVPN lets you control where you want sites to think you are located. You can choose from almost 100 different countries. So just imagine all the Netflix libraries that you can go through. Do you love Korean dramas? Use ExpressVPN to parasite off South Korean Netflix with your Netflix subscription. But you can also use ExpressVPN with Hulu, BBC iPlayer, YouTube, you name it. Hundreds of VPNs are out there. But the reason you want to use ExpressVPN to watch shows is because it's ridiculously fast. Like I'm speaking ridiculously fast. There's never any buffering or lag like in my speech. You can stream in HD, no problem. ExpressVPN also works on all your devices, phones, media consoles, smart TVs, and more, so you can watch what you want on the big screen or on the go. So if you want to get access to hundreds of new shows, go to expressvpn.com/lockedon right now and get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/lockedon, expressvpn.com/lockedon to learn more. We thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen. Now, when you're done with this show, head on over to Locked On Sports today. Get caught up on all the big stories across all of sports with the Locked On local experts. Coverage like you're never going to get anywhere else. Right here where you found this podcast, also on YouTube. Jake, Karl-Anthony Towns, when he went down, I was sitting there at the Celtics game, and the video started getting passed around to the media. And we were like, it was like, oh, geez, well, Cat blew out his knee. Oh, wait, Cat blew out his Achilles. Turns out 4 to 6 weeks with a calf strain, which is maybe the best news considering how it looked. So Towns is out for a little while. He'll be back. The Timberwolves have been struggling. They are currently, where are they? 10-11. They've lost 3 in a row. This is a team that basically went all in, getting Rudy Gobert. So I think part of the issue has been they haven't figured out how to use Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert. And Anthony Edwards has had his moments where he's complained about the spacing. And the guys yesterday talked about this as well. The question here in our real or fake, our weekly real or fake, is do you think, well, actually, no, the statement is, let me remember how we do this segment. The statement is Karl-Anthony Towns' injury is actually going to be a good thing for the Minnesota Timberwolves.
So I get why this is a question, and I get why a lot of people would say true. And at first I was leaning towards that, right? You are forcing this team to sink or swim here, I think. You're kind of taking out their baseline, and that's been Karl-Anthony Towns, especially offensively, right? Like, he's just as reliable as they come. He does a lot for them, both on the interior and in the perimeter, and you're removing that. So let's force these guys to learn how to play together, right? And it seems like it should be easy. They did it in the third and fourth quarter of that game the other night. Just run a ton of pick and rolls with Rudy Gobert and Anthony Edwards and D'Angelo Russell. They're kind of forgotten man here. And it probably is going to lead to success, right? Because Rudy Gobert is actually a very, very, very good pick and roll big. It's why he thrived in Utah. That's great. You can do that for 4 to 6 weeks. And then what? You've got to figure it back out with Karl-Anthony Towns. So on the surface, like, yeah, it seems like this is true. This is good for him. They'll learn how to use these guys. But the answer is actually fake. Because when they come back, when Towns comes back, you're still in the same mess that has them. What's their record? You said it was 10-11, right? They haven't looked like they've figured it out. You're going to have to go through this whole process of, cool, we run a ton of pick and rolls with Rudy Gobert, but what do we do when Rudy Gobert and Towns are back out there on the court together? And that's been the question all season long. So yeah, if you remove one from the equation, you're good for a little bit, but you still have to answer that same damn question, and that doesn't look like it's a good answer right now. I think they can figure it out. I think Chris Finch is a smart enough coach, but you're not going to get the answer to that when Towns isn't on the court. So it's fake.
So I disagree, and I'm going to say it's real. The answer is it's real. This will help the Timberwolves because they've needed some way to simplify things, and I think by taking Karl-Anthony Towns out, and Karl-Anthony Towns, as much as he is an offensive crux for the Timberwolves, he's also a defensive liability. And if the Timberwolves, who just lost to the Hornets and the Wizards, 2 terrible teams, if the Timberwolves can get it back, if they can start finding some success, if Edwards getting some space gets him some success, if they find some defensive success and they start winning, somebody needs to go to Karl-Anthony Towns and be like, okay, when you come back, you got to be a different guy. This is your come to Jesus. This is we love what you do, but also we need you to be the superstar that kind of sacrifices a little bit, and whatever it is, whatever way they actually, because I do actually think that they can find some success here. They will be forced to come together, and Anthony Edwards will find some space that he's been dying for, and they will find some things in this in Cat's absence that will say, because Finch is such a good coach, they'll be like, oh, wait, we can use this. And I don't know if it's just an earlier substitution, if it's a different staggering, if it's a different lineup, if it's whatever it is, they'll be able to say, okay, with Cat, we have this. Without him, we do this. I think they can figure out how to make that work. And so I'm going to say that this is real. This is an opportunity to experiment, especially at this time of year, Jake. End of November, beginning of December, you'll get them back around the Christmas area. Everybody talks about that being the sort of unofficial beginning of the season. This is an opportunity early on for the Timberwolves to take a good hard look at themselves. And I think this is a chance for maybe Karl-Anthony Towns to take a good hard look at himself as a defensive player. And I think they can come out of these 4 to 6 weeks a better team with better focus and a better plan for how to be a good team.
I mean, look, again, I get why people say that. I just don't know if this is kind of the catalyst and the spark for all of that, right? Trying to figure out maybe they need catalyst, right? Look at me using my English degree and things there. You know, they those things you just raised, right? They already knew that. They've known that for a while. It doesn't need to have this injury to take away your most productive player, arguably, to be like, cool, now we can experiment and figure those things out. You probably should have been doing that before, given that your record's not great. You're forced to here, but now you're forced to rely more on D'Angelo Russell. Do you feel truly good about that? You talk about Towns being bad defensively. Now you've got to give more minutes and like a bigger role to D'Angelo Russell here.
Fair point. I have no counterpoint on that. But I can deflect and say these guys also didn't have a training camp together. And so they didn't have the opportunity to figure a lot of this stuff out. So they've been trying to crash things together on the fly. This is still a flawed roster, no doubt. And there will be opportunities, I think, during the course of the season to change the mix on this roster, possibly. But because they didn't have a training camp, because Gobert had the Eurobasket and Cat was, he had an illness, and I think they just kind of got thrown together, and this opportunity to maybe say, okay, let's remove something from the equation and see if we can figure something out here. And then once you figure out what works with these guys, then you can figure out, okay, he's got these skills. We can actually plug this in a certain way. I think removing a guy from that equation is actually going to be helpful to kind of spur some of the brainstorming on how to make them work together.
So I get what you're saying. I'll save them a month of pain here. What's going to work is a bunch of pick and rolls with Rudy Gobert. I'll tell you guys that right now. We can book this one. We can revisit it in 4 to 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, whatever his timeline was. And then we can revisit how you integrate Karl-Anthony Towns into that when we've already known how this is going to go. It's one of those things, right? Like, how's this? Let me rephrase the question here. Is this good for the Minnesota Timberwolves if they realize this roster just doesn't work during this time period and there's no way to reintegrate Cat back into this and go, okay, we really need to try and mix something up? Does that count as good as understanding where you are in the flawed roster? And I don't think the roster is that bad. They can probably still figure it out with Towns, Gobert, and all of these guys. But maybe you just are like, nope. And you pull a plug on a guy or make a trade based on that. Does that mean it's been a good period of time for him?
I mean, I don't know. I guess anything that gets them to where they're supposed to be, whether it's making a deal or just tweaking some things on offense and on defense. I don't know. I feel like, I think we're both sitting here kind of saying, like, we never understood why you would even trade for Gobert in the first place. But yeah, I don't know. If they sit there and they go, oh God, we're a great team without Karl-Anthony Towns, then I don't know. How do you?
They're gonna have some success without him. They're gonna have some success without him. Like, I really believe that.
They will.
Is it just too many like cooks in the kitchen kind of thing? I'm not sure. I don't know. Right? This is what you got to go listen to Locked On Timberwolves for.
All right, that's. I don't think we're gonna get anywhere further than this. You say fake, I say real. Tell us what you think.
We
disagree. For once, we disagree. If you're on the YouTube page, just hop in the comments and let us know what you think about this. Is it real or is it fake? And tell us why you believe this. All right, so that's going to be the end of this Wednesday Locked On NBA. As always on Wednesday, we're your two hosts. I'm John Karalis. I host the Locked On Celtics podcast. Find me on Twitter at John_Karalis.
And I'm Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast. I'm on Twitter. It's at Nola Jake.
Nick Angstead, Pat the Designer, are tomorrow's hosts. Make sure you're subscribed to get that show when it drops. Watch the show on YouTube and share the podcast with your friends and family. Tell them that they should all be listening to and watching the Locked On NBA podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.